Hello, everybody, and welcome to CONSERVATISH, episode 261. My name is Peter Feliciano. Wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe, share, rate, and review. And I'm serious, that helps the algorithm. I've been fighting these censors for a long time, so I need your help. And if you're unwilling to Venmo me or join my Patreon at patreon.com/conservatish, at least subscribe, leave a comment, do something like that. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano and on Twitter at Rule62Peter. And I'm unsure whether or not I'm going to join Threads. Have you heard the Threads, Carla?
Heard of it, but I can't remember what it is.
It's a new meta thing. It's like Twitter, but run by losers. So I don't know if I'm going to.
Okay, yeah. Oh, they're trying to get people off Twitter, right? It's
exactly. Yeah. And I'm sure it'll be cool maybe for like a quick second, and then it'll be, gotcha. We're going to censor you now. So I don't know if I'm even going to mess with it, but we'll see. Never mind all that. Everybody, our wonderful guest today is Carla Howell. Thank you so much. Yay for joining me. It is an honor. You and I met over at PorkFest a couple weeks ago and had some great conversations. But prior to us having some good conversation, I saw you talk about campaigns and about campaign strategy and about specifically how your talk on proposals was brilliant. And then doing some reading about you and stuff, getting into your history, I'm like, oh, Carla is a formidable force in the libertarian movement. So could you please maybe at least first tell people where to find you or if they can support you anywhere?
Sure. My website is carlahowell.com. That's where I post music that I have written, libertarian music. That's a recent project. That's the most immediate way to reach me. You can also reach me from something I hope we touch on during this podcast, which is the Center for Small Government, an organization I co-founded years ago. It's on hold at the moment, but looking to restart it in the near future and looking for people who might want to be involved in that. So centerforsmallgovernment.com, either website, you can contact me through the website.
Fantastic. So as far as I saw it was 2005, I think, Center for Small Government. And the way I don't know if it was you or someone else wrote that blurb on there. But it talked about bold proposals. And to me, I was reading through that and I'm like, this doesn't seem bold. I mean, it seems bold, but it doesn't seem like the end of the world, maybe to the people who have the government power. Absolutely. It seems like the end of the world, but I kind of like that. So can you talk a little bit about your experience prior to becoming a liberty activist?
Prior to being a liberty activist, that was a long time ago, because that would have been 95 and earlier. I spent most of my life being apolitical. I was in high tech, product management, engineering, and did some consulting. So that was my career up through the 90s. And then I moved into politics when I discovered it in a big way in the mid 90s, and especially with the Harry Browne campaign, Libertarian for President in 1996. He's the one his campaign is what really got me active.
Do you remember what ideologically was the shift from being apolitical into being political?
Healthcare. I'm a little unusual. I've only met one other person who said healthcare. Maybe today there's a lot of people who would say that, but back when I got active, healthcare got me in because I'd been in high tech and I'd seen computers used in all kinds of fields, and the medical industry was just way behind. And I thought, there's a lot of opportunity to make healthcare better, in particular with decision support systems. And the problem was very few people were trying it. The whole industry, doctors didn't know how to use a computer back then. So the problem is that the licensing laws basically prohibited any kind of really useful decision support system. And I said, that's crazy. Why wouldn't you use a decision support system? There's all this information out there that can help people more quickly find out their diagnosis and their treatment options once they have a diagnosis. And this should be pretty, 101 in medical, what they call informatics, because they had to have another name for it, I guess. But what the licensing laws people were trying to develop these products and they couldn't get them into the market because the licensing laws is monopolized, gives doctors a monopoly on the dissemination of healthcare. You notice anyone who talks about healthcare has to put this big disclaimer. This is not medical advice. Don't listen to anything we're saying because we don't count. Only your doctor counts, basically. You have to put that disclaimer there. And that's the licensing laws that basically give a monopoly to doctors. And they now also give it to insurance companies. And apparently the CDC now has grabbed a piece of that pie. So I said, this is crazy. Doctors should be specializing in the hard stuff, not the stuff that computers can do. We should computerize a lot of this. And then I found, I did a lot of reading and trying to figure out why is this, what's stopping this from happening? And I finally realized it was politics. The only reason these systems didn't get developed 40 years ago or more is because of government barriers to health freedom. And that's just one of them. There are many, many government barriers to health freedom. And then I discovered the Libertarian Party was the only party that supported medical freedom explicitly. Republicans kind of pretend to, but they certainly don't. They're part of the gravy train of healthcare and big government. So I got active with the Libertarian Party. Long answer to your question.
No. I appreciate that. That's an interesting story. Yeah, most people, I think you're right, that I've talked to usually come into it through either a crazy experience or a death or someone takes somebody's gun or they this or that, but getting involved, it happens when it happens. For me, it was roughly a little bit before 2016. I just, I was in my 20s. I had turned 30 in 2016, and I just was like, I was throughout most of my 20s, I was just trying to keep a job and get girls. Like I wasn't, interested in things of politics or government, whatever.
I understand.
And I think getting foisted, if you will. Now, obviously, these days it makes sense. A lot of Gen Zers or whatever are quite not aware. Aware wouldn't be the word I would use, but are emotionally manipulated into making believe they're aware politically. But back in, it definitely back in my day, it certainly wasn't like that. And now it's it's kind of a religion. It's a religion to be either you're left or you're right. And you take this part, and if you deviate even a little bit. Now, conservatives are better with this. I will say conservatives are better with this, or Republicans or whatever the hell are better with this, because there is something built in to modern day leftism that forces moderates to bend the knee to the furthest left. Because if you don't, then you become right. Then you become a part of the problem. Then you become a Nazi. Even if 2 seconds ago, you're with them 99% of the way, but on this one issue, nope, Nazi. Nope, white supremacist. Even if you're black, even if you're gay, even if you're trans, even if you're right. There's nothing built into modern day right that would make centrists have to bend to the knee of, actual Nazis, right? And the religion is really what bothered me. That's why the show is called Conservatish, because I was like, can't I like guns and gays? Like, do I have to pick a side? This is boring to me. I don't like sides.
Right. They're a little bundled package that were put there by special interest groups over the years that either co-opted the Democratic or the Republican Party. They have no relationship to each other. Abortion has nothing to do with guns, has nothing to do with foreign policy, et cetera, et cetera. And they just clustered these things. And a lot of people buy into these packages rather than thinking through each issue. And the truth is, a lot of people do, like you and me, think through the issues, and they usually call themselves independents, or they may not. But many people do disagree with pieces of these packages, so they don't have quite the monopoly, it appears. But yeah, people do bend to these the latest, cool trend. And so I want to get into what you started talking about, the talk that you saw me, which is these left-right polarizing conversations, which have been going on forever. They've just gone to a fever pitch in the last few years.
The left-right what? I'm sorry. The left-right what?
Polarizing
okay.
battles, whatever form they take. Now there's wokeism. Before, they were doing another version of the same thing. And, you know, you listen to, I listen to a local radio host here in DC, in the DC area, and I flip between that and Bloomberg News, left, right, and they're both nauseating in their own way. They're just both intent on smashing the other side nonstop. And so I'm extremely uninterested in these conversations. It's not just, yeah, they're annoying, but that is not the conversation that we need to be having. The conversation we need to be having is about shrinking government. If you're a fiscal conservative or conservative-ish or libertarian or small government or liberty, I don't call myself, I don't like labels. If you think government is way too big and you want it a lot smaller, this is a conversation that we need to be having. And that is a conversation about proposing specific reductions in government and popularizing those proposals. That's what our opponents do. That's how you sell something. You make a specific proposal. You know, here's a Ginsu knife or a My Pillow or something. And then you talk about what it does. And then you talk about the benefits of why your life will be better when you buy this thing or vote for this candidate or get on board with this movement like ending the Fed. I don't want to just audit the Fed. I want to end the Fed and replace it with nothing. No ability for the federal government to control monetary policy, to do anything other than print. You can print dollars, the Constitution lets you do that, but you cannot bar competition to the dollar. So any currency should be legal. And you may not go in debt. No debt, ever. Just illegalize government debt. There's no reason for it. You could argue, well, maybe short-term bridge loans for cash flow or something like that. But for the most part, there's no reason for debt. What we need is a dramatic reduction in government spending, authority, power, size, scope, liabilities, assets. Every aspect of government is way bigger than it should be. It's dramatically bigger. And what do we spend our time talking about? We're on the defense because our opponents want to make it even bigger. And we go, no, not more, not another gun regulation. No, not the Green New Deal. No, not a shutdown and a mandate. And we are always on the defense. We are the followers, and it's usually the Democrats and sometimes the Republicans who are the leaders, who are the entrepreneurs, who are calling the shots, who are setting the agenda for what we're all going to be talking about. And even we libertarians, conservative, small government advocates and supporters, what do we spend our time talking about? We talk about their ideas for more government. We don't talk about our ideas for much less government. And this is something that's is especially important for candidates who are running for office, but it's something we all can be doing. And I notice when I am in a group of libertarians, in a social group, we're usually talking about big government. We're not talking about solutions. Now, to some degree, yeah, you got to talk about it. You need to vent, whatever. You know, there's a lot of reasons to talk about it. But there's hardly any conversation about shrinking government. And where it really disappoints me was when I go to a candidate's website, go to the issue section, platform section, whatever they want to call it, and check out where they stand. What are they actually saying they will do if elected? A lot of times they don't even specify what they're going to do. They wax philosophical. They talk about what they want, what they think is right, and they talk about what's wrong with government. Well, you might want a short blurb on what's wrong with government, cover the key points, why a particular government program is horrible. And then you go to the solution. And the solution should be usually to eliminate an entire agency or an entire function of government. And then the very next important step, of course, if you're a candidate, you make promises about what you'll do. You get specific, like I'm going to propose a bill. I will work tirelessly to pass a bill to XYZ. And then the next very important step that is almost always neglected is the benefits. You have to talk about why a dramatic cut in taxes will make your life better. Harry Brown used to say, ending the income tax back in that day, excuse me, would put $6,000 on average back into the family budget of every American family. $6,000 that you can spend or save or give away to a charity or a church of your choice. And he would get really specific about what it means to actually end the income tax, so people can visualize it. Just like when you're watching a commercial for a Ginsu knife or something, it slices, it dices, it goes in the dishwasher. It's only $19.95, and you can get 2 now if you call now and get blah, blah, blah. Benefits, benefits, benefits. And we are withholding from the world the conversation about the benefits of liberty. Imagine if government was as small as we can idealize that it be today. What would that be like? What would it actually be like if there was no Federal Reserve printing money, the dollar was stable, you were more financially secure, you weren't paying an income tax, you probably weren't paying a state income tax. Many of the taxes would go away, and what's left would be tiny. There'd be no government control of education. There'd be a complete free market in education. There'd be immense diversity. Kids wouldn't get bullied at school. There'd be happiness and harmony of families and teachers and children finding each other, the people that work together and teach and learn together the best, where kids can be the best they can be. Their learning ability would accelerate. They'd be much smarter. They'd be much more prepared for the world. They'd be able to critically think much more than today. I mean, the benefits, we could talk for hours and days about the benefits of government, of making government small. And they're huge, and we need to talk about them because we're withholding vital information.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've noticed that a lot with, content creators and people on this side. We do a lot of talking about the problem, not just because we need to vent, but also because we need to diagnose it, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to understand the thinking of why you would, maim a child, under the auspices anyway, under the guise of they feel like a different gender or fill in the blank. It's hard, and so trying to diagnose it is part of the reason. But then we get caught in this loop, and there are people on my side and on the libertarian side or whatever, or wherever you're at, who profit off of the fear porn, who profit off of the complain porn, who profit off of, let's just go in a loop. Did you see what crazy stuff they did? Did you see what AOC said? It's water off a duck's back for me. Someone tweeted something. So someone said something somewhere. I don't know, why would I let that anyway? So
it is
caught in that loop.
It is easy. And to a large degree, it's natural. It's what we're going to talk about. But the thing is, you can always end it with, well, what should it be? How do we get from here, instead of just complaining about it? How do we get from here to freedom? What do we do? And so if you're talking about people grooming kids in schools, talk about ending the Federal Department of Education, ending the state departments of education, completely localized control to the cities and towns where parents can be involved, have much more say in what's going on, where teachers can have much more say in what's going on, because you don't have these departments and all their programs telling them what their curriculum has to be, telling them how to teach, telling them what forms they have to fill out for hours every day. Mm-hmm. They have more freedom to be creative. The local governments can legalize and remove the barriers to homeschool and pod schools and learning centers and the great variety that the free market in education offers, so that people can find a fit for their kid that works for them and that can move them. If it quits working, they can move them to a different school. It would be so cheap. The homeschool economy is showing that education does not have to cost $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 per kid for an education that leaves them unable to do math, unable to read and write at any kind of skill, and very unprepared for a job. Right. Instead, you have what a lot of the homeschool sectors and private school sector is producing, which is kids who are mature and balanced, and they don't have as many social issues. They're not subjected to bullying at school. They're often easily able to get into colleges, and property taxes can go down now too. Federal, state, and local taxes can all go down when we get rid of these government intrusions.
Right. I will add one anecdotal but still relevant piece of experience, because when you said that less kids will be bullied, right? My initial thought was, well, hang on. And then I remembered I had a woman on my show a few years ago who's a anonymous San Francisco teacher. And she talked about being in public schools, and then she had switched over to private. And she said it was a wild difference, not just in the comportment and the behavior and the attitude of the kids, but one of the elements that switched that is that those kids can be kicked out. Those kids, right? Meaning similar to tenure, right, with teachers, right? What are you going to do? If you kick me out of this school, I'll just go to another public school. If you just switch. And most of the time, because there's no consequence. But when a child has been told and shown that my parents are sacrificing to put me in this school, this is a big deal, this is a good school, this is a whatever, suddenly there's value put in the lap of a kid, and that changes their perspective of what learning is, of what being in this school means, of whatever. And she said that absolutely was one of the main differences, the main fulcrum between those two experiences.
Yeah. And a lot of people will say, well, what about the kids who can't get in? Well, often they're kids that have a behavior problem. They may have problems at home. They may have, Lord knows what kind of problems they're dealing with. But they're usually not benefiting from being in a school. The kids who go and bully are often the kids that don't do homework, aren't there to learn. They're disrupting class. They don't care. And they're not in an environment that gives them any incentive to learn. They're not interested. They're looking for something else to do because they're bored out of their minds. They're better off being kicked out and working at a McDonald's. You might have to also repeal some labor laws, but let them go get a job. They'd like to have the money. They would learn responsibility. They would learn something about the world. They'd learn why they need some basic math. I mean, they stand to benefit as well, because no one is really winning in a school with kids who don't want to be there.
Right. Now, can we also diagnose the problem a little bit? Because talking to that main idea that your website talked about, these are bold ideas if people are new to them. Now, my listeners are not new to them. In fact, I had a thought about it. Well, maybe I'll get to it. But I even had a thought about it. Why are you having somebody who wants to do politics? I mean, even that, the anarchists who follow me, like they even think that's, selling up to the man. But anyway, but it's not new to my people. But I do think diagnosing the problem is an important thing. So why do you feel, and you're preaching to the choir in many ways, but because I can already hear it in some of the comments, I can already see it some of the responses to my posts. Well, what would we do without a federal government? What would we do without a federal income? Who would pay for the roads, right? So can we talk a little bit about not only that the roads are being paved by a construction company that we could have paid for, but instead we gave our money to the government to have them pick somebody who we could have easily, and they have a blank check to go 5 years to put a pothole in, right? So let's diagnose the problem a little bit with that. What are your responses to some of that pushback?
Well, first of all, the campaigns I ran to end the state income tax in Massachusetts, for example, I also ran on that as both a federal and state candidate, ending the federal or the state income tax. First of all, that's not proposing getting rid of all of government. Some people might want to run on that. I don't. I run on small government. I run on dramatically reducing the size and scope and authority of government. So that still leaves tons of taxes. In fact, at one of our we have a couple of archived websites from our tax cut initiatives. One's called rollbacktaxes.com and one is called smallgovernmentact.com or org or both. Either one will get you there. They articulate, one of them articulates all the taxes, and it gives an example of the state government of Massachusetts, the city of New York, a few other states, maybe the federal government or federal level, all the taxes that you pay to these entities. There's tons of them. The income tax is just one of them. Now, the federal income tax, in truth, would be hard to eliminate immediately unless you're also willing to severely downsize Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And that's a problem. I mean, I'm very bold, but my view is that those are a hard sell. And there's also an issue of fairness, that People say all these seniors get all these benefits. Well, the seniors have been forced to pay into these things for most of their careers, money that if they'd been allowed to keep would give them a nest egg far more valuable than what Social Security will ever pay them. And when they die, they'll be able to heir it to their kids if it was private, but no, government keeps it. If you die before you retire, too bad, all that money you pay just goes to the government. So, and there's also the issue of healthcare, both Medicare and Medicaid. Now, there are so many things that drive up the cost of healthcare, all caused by government. State licensing board, state and federal insurance regulations, including Obamacare, subsidies themselves, of course. And there are hundreds of healthcare bureaucracies and welfare, different types of healthcare welfare. It's incredibly complicated. I've been watching healthcare policy for a few decades, and I don't know anyone who knows the whole of it, because it's now up to $4 trillion or more that we spend a year on healthcare, 4 or 5 trillion. So it's huge. And what we need to do in the case of Medicare and Medicaid, in my opinion, is we need to first remove the regulation so that the costs can plummet. And then we start backing off the subsidies of Medicare and Medicaid, because, excuse me, the healthcare costs somewhere on average, I estimate, between 5 and 10 times what it should, probably closer to 10 times. Office visits, lab tests, drugs, operations, and procedures, dramatically overpriced. Especially if you don't have insurance and you have to pay cash, you get hit with a super bill that's just insanely overpriced. So the correct path is liberty first, then cut. You need to make it cheap enough that people have a way to survive without being dependent on Medicare and Medicaid. Right now, when I turned 65, my insurance company dumped me. You can't even buy insurance if you're over 65 because Medicare has preempted the marketplace. So, excuse me. So you need a way to make it cheaper. You get rid of all the healthcare regulations. In the case of when I was living in Massachusetts, you couldn't buy catastrophic healthcare. The most logical kind of healthcare is a low-cost policy that covers those really expensive, unexpected events.
Can I ask you to
pay cash for the rest?
Right. Can I ask you to clarify or maybe repeat it? But are you saying that when someone turns 65, the government has a monopoly on their health care?
I don't know anywhere you can buy it. I know mine just dumped me. They just expect everyone to go on Medicare. And I don't know of any market for insurance. Then maybe there is one. And you can get these boutique things, which you could call insurance in a way. But I don't know of any insurance policy you can buy. And even if there is one, no doubt the government makes it massively expensive, way more expensive than it needs to be. And it may, outlaw the catastrophic care. So what you want is to return the healthcare system to cash as much as possible with an absolute minimum of insurance, because insurance always inflates, always causes waste. So you want a minimum of insurance and a maximum of cash transactions that are negotiated directly between the patient, consumer, and the practitioner. And then you can drive down costs. In the area of drugs, you get rid of the FDA, you get rid of all these patent loopholes that allow them to, get patents. You quit funding patents. Taxpayers are paying for research, and then the academic at the university gets a patent for it. Maybe Fauci gets some of the patent. A few people get some of the patent, not you, not the one who paid for the research. There's all kinds of obscene amounts of money in the whole drug industry that's driving up costs. So rules and regulations around lab tests and testing, CON laws, or certificate of need laws that are in, I think, 35 of the 50 states have CON laws. I'm not sure the number, but a lot of them do, not all of them. And what they say is if you're a community hospital, you can't buy a CT scanner or MRI machine unless you get permission. And the people who decide on permission is a committee that includes the big hospitals in the big cities who don't want competition. So they say, you don't need a CT scanner. You don't need an MRI. You don't need and it hamstrings the small community colleges from being competitive with the big oligopoly of hospitals in the big city. So there's just so much of this junk. Oh, and one of the worst ones is they there's pretty close to a prohibition on free care, charitable care, donated by doctors. I mean, a doctor and nurse can do pro bono if they want, but if you want to set up a free clinic, there used to be a big Boston free clinic in downtown Boston. It's gone. And there's very few operations I've been able to find in the United States where they do free care for the poor that are not getting a government subsidy. There's some that call themselves a nonprofit, this or that, but they're getting a big government handout and they're not really a charity. Okay. But and it's very hard to set up charities. And there's one of the rules is interstate licensing is prohibited by a lot of the states. So you got to get rid of all the regulations that prohibit free care so that there is a market of people, and I mean market in the non-paying sense, of people, doctors, nurses, and just volunteers who want to help, who can provide free care for people. There's a group in Tennessee called Remote Area Medical, and they do this in rural areas of America where they set up a tent for a day and people line up, like 1,500 people. It's first come, first serve, and they get free dental care for a day or free vision care or some kind of primary care. And it's a beautiful thing because the people who come are extremely grateful for something they couldn't afford, had no way to get, and Medicaid wasn't giving it to them. It's extremely satisfying for the volunteers who do it. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost a dime of taxpayer money, and the people who do pay do it because they want to. And it's a beautiful human sharing experience that's extremely productive for people and helpful for people. So, we got to get rid of all the barriers to free care, make it very, very easy for people to set up free clinics so that people have a place to go. And then we can phase out Medicaid. And then we can also, when it just becomes cheap enough, people say, screw Medicare. I'll buy a catastrophic policy if I even need it and pay cash. And I'm paying less than I am paying now for premiums for Medicare in a lot of cases. It doesn't need to be expensive. We just have this illusion that it's expensive, and government is the cause. Government has made it expensive. We need to make it cheap.
Yeah, that's an area I had not even thought of. I mean, I think one of the creepiest parts for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And I've talked about it before on the show, but I'd like to hear your input. In the diagnosis of the problem, it is really easy to ascribe malevolence to what could be ineptitude, right? / greed. Now, I delineate between those two things because we all kind of relate easier to the desire for greed. Like we all kind of relate to that more than I'm not malevolent. I've never wanted to hurt anyone, which is a lie, everybody. If you're telling yourself that, but it's easy to just immediately, villain. Mm-hmm. But so much of it, I think let's again, everybody, is it working out the way we're doing it? Is it working out? Right? Not only do people spend most of our time talking about the problem, but we also spend most of our time talking about the culture war rather than like, oh, let's fight about pronouns when the Fed is like, thank you, go ahead. No, keep
exactly.
fighting about pronouns. Keep fighting about pronouns. We're gonna bleed you dry and then run to the Caymans. By the way, everybody, there's this idea on the right and on the left too, that, oh, we're going to get him. People, Biden is going to go to jail. Guys, he's not going to jail. Hunter Biden, not going to. People like that do not pay the consequences that you and I pay. But understand, if there is going to be anything, and I know I'm going on a quick tangent, I apologize, but if there is anything coming down the pike, the benefit is exposure. The benefit is to help us get dejected and disappointed in government and realize, wait a second, they're not paying the consequences that I, with my $601 Venmo transaction, am, right? And to help us get a little bit more angry and a little bit fed up. Getting people fed up is part of the solution, right?
Yeah, I think I call it the warm-up act. Okay. You want to remind people of the damage being done.
Yeah.
What they say in marketing, pain, solution, benefit. I forget the words that they use to describe. You lay out the problem, explain the pain, the damage being done. Here's the solution. Get rid of the Fed, get rid of the Department of Education, repeal the anti-gun laws, whatever it is. And here's the benefits. And here's how your life will be better. Here's how the average Joe, average Jane will be better off. And so, yeah, we all do it. We're all going to complain about big government. But, at a minimum, we got to make sure we put on the end of it the solutions and the benefits so that we are taking control. We are calling the shots and they are on the defensive against us. And, one of the most gratifying things about our ending income tax initiatives that I ran in Massachusetts, there was 3 of them between 2002 and 2010. 2 of them were to end the state income tax and 1 was to cut the sales tax. And the opposition was fierce. But what we did was we got people talking about our initiative. We were calling the shots and they were attacking us, trying to discredit us, which of course, was something we had to be prepared for and respond to. But we were driving. We were driving the train to liberty. And they were throwing rocks at us trying to stop the train instead of the other way around. Mm-hmm. So that's what we want. That's what we want, is for them to be on the defensive, them to be divided and fighting about who's wasting government more. What I'd love to see is a argument. A lot of teachers resent the administrators in their schools because they're making a lot of money and they don't do any teaching and they're just sitting on their butt making 150 grand or whatever it is. And they're like, what? Why are these people so overpaid? Fight, fight, fight. These teachers should be mad at these administrators. Fight. And let's all unite for small government. So, get them fighting us, get them fighting each other, and let us move to victory. Let us move to small government and freedom.
Awesome. Now, in a word to accessibility, because we're talking about the benefits, we're talking about the diagnosis of the problem. Absolutely. Let's talk about concrete. How easy do you believe it would be to do that? You spoke a little bit about how ending the federal income tax, as an example, would potentially hurt Medicare, and but let's bring that vision to a more tangible way for people who are listening. Is this really something we could do? How do you believe it would look? And besides the bureaucrats, would there be any, bad stuff, or not bad stuff? God, my vocabulary. Would there be any drawbacks?
Okay. Well, let's decide. First of all, we're talking about the state income tax or the federal income tax?
Let's go federal, please.
Okay. So, so when you say would there be any drawbacks, do you mean
to the average citizen? Would there be, things like that? Yeah.
Okay. So personally, what I would do is I would not immediately cut off Medicare and Medicaid for the reasons I discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. Say freedom first, and we will eventually fully end the federal income tax when we're able to do that, when we have cut the costs enough of Medicare and Medicaid. Social Security, I wouldn't want to end. I just think it'd be unfair. I mean, you could make an argument that it's not really fair to say that, if the federal government was to actually default, I don't think it's going to, but let's say it did. Who would be more deserving? The people who were forced into paying for Social Security, and now many of them have virtually no assets. They are completely dependent on it for their livelihood. Or the people who bought treasury bills voluntarily. Now, I don't propose that we default on the national debt, and I don't think we have to, at least not yet. And I hope never. But the last thing I'd want to cut is Social Security, especially to the people who paid into it. Mm-hmm. If you just immigrated here and you somehow managed to get yourself on the Social Security dole, not so much. But the people who've paid it all their lives, it's just not fair. And they have no immediate, some of them have no family to lean on. They'd be completely homeless and dependent on people they don't even know to survive. And I think that's just too much to propose. But we can move away from it. We can talk about allowing people to opt out of it and, moving in that direction. And when we get rid of the liabilities of Medicare and Medicaid, that's going to become a lot easier. So that's how I would put it, because I don't want to make it in any way a downside for the average person. It should be all benefit. The people who will get hurt, or the people hurt, will be the people who lose their jobs. Now, I've lost jobs in my life. Most people have lost jobs in their lives. Do we die?
No.
No. What do? We get another job. There's turmoil. It could come at a difficult time. I'm not trying to minimize that it cannot be a very challenging situation. Hey, I graduated in the 70s from college. There were no jobs in the 70s. No one alive today knows unemployment like the 70s, and none of us knew it like the 30s. Okay. We have not experienced anything that difficult. So it's not to minimize the disruption of losing a job, and it can be a very difficult thing, but it can also be a blessing in disguise. And here's a very interesting tidbit. It's more than a tidbit. One of the very great benefits of small government is job creation. When you cut taxes, it moves money from the government sector to the private sector. In the government sector, they waste it. In the private sector, they spend it much better. They spend it on things that people actually want. They employ people in jobs making products and services for which there is a real demand, not an artificial government contrived demand. And when we did one of our tax cuts in Massachusetts, there was a think tank called the Beacon Hill Institute who ran one of their economic models that said that our tax cut would result, this was the sales tax cut, in 2010, would result in 15,000 jobs being lost in the Massachusetts state government and 33,000 jobs being created in the private sector.
Oh,
yeah,
beautiful.
And I've seen a similar study on the federal level. So if you're working for government, and you have pretty much unheard of financial security that doesn't exist in most of the private sector, but you're probably bored, you're probably uninspired, you're probably annoyed with all the red tape you have to deal with. You probably are unhappy about the fact that a lot of what you do doesn't make any difference, and that you're just another part of the gears of government that are just wasting taxpayer dollars. And when you work in the private sector, not always. There's problems in any job. But generally speaking, when you go home at the end of the day, you can say you did something that someone was willing to pay money for because they actually wanted what you were giving them. And that makes people a lot happier and more satisfied.
There's innovation in the private sector. There's no innovation in the public sector.
Yeah, a lot more creative jobs available in the private sector. Much more creative. So, I don't think the average person has everything to gain. The billionaires, what's the guy who has Pfizer? What's his name?
Oh, Bourla.
Bourla. Yeah. He could stop making billions of dollars in completely unearned profit, that kills people and does incredible damage to people. He would not be making as much money, and I'm very sorry to say, Mr. Bourla, this would not be something you personally would benefit from, since you don't seem to give a damn about what happens to human beings and babies and families and small businesses that go under. Doesn't bother you, so no, it wouldn't be good for him.
No, but I just want to again hit that. This is. It's not just that Bourla has done what he's done. It's not just that Pfizer has done what they've done. You've underwritten it, everybody. You've paid for it. The mandates that you're so angry about? You paid for that, okay? You know that it's not the government's money. It's your money, okay? They're not just wasting it. It is waste. There's a lot of bloat, of course. It's just like you were talking about. The administration has I think quadrupled in the healthcare, but there's like very slow rise in doctors. But it's not just waste; it's also malevolence. It's also paying for your own destruction, right?
Yes. Yes. Michael Cloud is a man who I partnered with on a lot of our campaigns in Massachusetts, a brilliant political activist who's written a couple of books. Secrets of Libertarian Persuasion was his first one. And he came up with this idea of the bonsai test for a government agency.
Okay.
And, most people who have money don't want to waste it. They don't want to lose it. They certainly wouldn't want to burn it. But he said, so you take the money for a given agency, like the CDC, and if we'd be better off if the money we gave to the CDC was put in a bonfire and burned instead, would we be better off? And if the answer is yes to the bonsai test, then that agency definitely has to go because it's doing more damage than good.
Right. We'll start wrapping up here in a minute. Well, maybe a couple minutes. You're okay to go another 15, maybe?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So now when it comes to solutions, you've talked about, and you had a brilliant talk on campaign strategy at PorcFest. You yourself have run for Senate and for governor. And then there was a third one. I'm completely spacing on it. I'm sorry.
State auditor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you've jumped into the fray.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, some of my fans, some of my followers, they're just, like, oh, government is going to do what they're, what the black pill is, right? They're super, the black pill is everything's hopeless, right?
Yeah,
the black pill is everything's hopeless. That what's the point? Right. Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. And then there's the white pill, which is like, yeah, everything's screwed, but eventually everything will inevitably and inexorably improve. And I'm much more white pilled when it comes to that. But that doesn't mean that I don't fight. See, too much in the black pill is this idea of like, well, there's nothing I can do, and so I'm just going to sit here with my chickens and my guns and wait for them to knock on the door. And yeah. I think you jumped into the fray. Can you speak a little bit about why you did so?
Because campaigning is one of the most effective tools we have. We fight on a lot of fronts. There's podcasters that are luckily taking over the media from the legacy media. There's think tanks. There's single issue groups that go after specific issues. There's lawsuits, and there's campaigns. And you can say there's nullification, but that's usually tied in with a campaign. But it can also just be, the government backing off out of pressure. Campaigns, they're all useful and they all play a role. And campaigns are one of the most cost-effective ways of reaching people because we tend to, because of the polarization and because we just tend to find our podcast audiences or podcasts that we like and so forth, we often don't reach people outside a certain sphere. Mm-hmm. And when you're campaigning, you do. So even if you have little money and you're running as a libertarian or an outsider Republican or independent, you're going to get a certain amount of media. You're going to get podcasters are going to be the friendliest to you. And usually you get at least some modicum of legacy media coverage as well. So you're reaching people at a low cost. And you're not only talking about ideas, but hopefully you're talking about actual proposals. Hopefully you're selling them well and talking about benefits. So you're reaching people in the most powerful way because you're not just saying, this is an ideal and why these guys are so bad and wrong who were jamming us with taxes and regulations. You're giving them proposals for changing government policy. Now, you can argue that we're going in the wrong direction. We've had some advances in freedom over the years. Marijuana is mostly legalized and gay marriage is legal. And, we got out of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we jumped into Ukraine, but got out of that. So there are some improvements that happen here and there, but overall government is growing at a frightening pace. So, so I lost my train of thought. But okay, so you're asking about the anarchists, basically. We have to be putting the idea in people's heads that small government is possible, and this is how we do it. This is the specific way we get from here to there. And if people think they can just sit and what you say, guns and chickens and everything, it's all going to collapse someday and then we're just going to have freedom. No, we're probably going to have something more like the Middle East, just a different version of this or that tyrant running the show. We have to get people educated and aware and demanding small government and freedom. That is the mindset that we have to be putting out there. And campaigns is one of the best ways to do that. So it's both a way to outreach and it's a way to make government specifically possible and to demonstrate that that is true.
And libertarianism in and of, or anti-state, or whatever you want to call it, whatever way you're running it, is kind of an antidote to the way, because too often, the way it feels disingenuous, or it feels like the opposite of progress if you were to run a campaign or run for office, is like, but you're just going to be the new guy. Too often in the conservative movement, there's this idea, oh, but if we were in power, we would do better. You haven't. You were just as, evil. The solution, everybody, would be to have smaller government. Because then even if I ran it for office and I got in power, if I gutted my own authority, then it wouldn't matter if I was in power. It wouldn't matter if it was Trump or Biden or whoever. We would be insulated from government malevolence and ineptitude, from bloat. We would be insulated from it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael Cloud, who I just mentioned, my political partner in these campaigns, had a saying, if I can remember it right, he said, big government taxes us, regulates us, goes to war, does other bad things because they can. Small government doesn't do those things because it can't. Kind of the point you were just making. Yeah.
And along with that, what made me remember, I don't hit a lot of pushback because I think they understand, my followers understand that I think thoroughly about these things, and I'm plus I'm just big and intimidating. No, but I don't get a lot of pushback, but every once in a while I do get this ho hum Eeyore vibe when it comes to people go, oh no, it doesn't even matter. And what bothers me the most about it is that I've been a loser before, everybody. I have thought I was not. I remember, here's a perfect example. I think it's perfect. For years, I told myself I was not a book smart guy. I knew I was people smart. I knew I was street smart, right? I knew I was very interested in a lot of things. I didn't think I was dumb, but I thought, college is for other people, right? That higher learning stuff, that's not something I'm even capable of. And it was not just conscious or not just whatever, but it was deeply subconscious. And I knew it to be true. And then when the pandemic started, I lost my job. I had no other option. I was like, well, I want to do audio production. I'm a musician and it would be nice to do my own thing. Am I even able to? Yeah, let me try it. 2.5 years later, not only did I graduate with a 4-year degree in 29 months, because that was the, whatever, but I was a 3.98 GPA, second in my class, winning multiple awards. And yet I thought I was incapable of doing it, right? So I'm telling you, everybody, if you're listening, no, that we can't. You can't. I hate to sound corny, but you can't if you think you can't. And guess what? You can if you think you can.
Yes. Very true.
So,
very true.
Let's overthrow the government. No,
and repetition is key. Because why do we remember the Green New Deal? Because we heard it how many times?
Right.
They spread the narrative around the media and the politicians repeat it, and they're all saying, Green New Deal, excuse student loans, tax the rich, carbon tax or whatever it is. And they repeat it because no one's going to remember it when they hear it once. In fact, they say in advertising, you have to hear something 8 times before you remember it. Some number like that. So we have to popularize these things and say them over and over again. By speaking them, they become real. That's how anything comes into existence. Right. Is someone says it first, especially when you're talking about politics. Someone says it, and then it starts to become real. And yeah, there's been a lot of tyranny lately, like Biden just going in executive order things, and that's a problem. But for the most part, most of what we suffer under today with respect to government is proposals that they had to sell us at some level. They had to, it was sold during campaigns, they repeated it, they put it on their website, they put it on their yard sign. That's what we did with our end the income tax. We put it end the income tax, $3,500 back in the average family every year, benefit right there on the yard sign. And we just plastered it everywhere. You just have to keep repeating. You know, when I go to a candidate's website or Facebook page or social media, I was in the county parade today and met a lot of nice people. And you have to scroll to find anything about, well, what are you running on? Who the hell are you? Why should I care that you were at the county fair?
Right.
You know, every communication is an opportunity to plug small government, a specific proposal, why it's great, and why it will make your life better.
And I think that's where why so many, we're in a different time. You were talking about how podcasts have overtaken legacy media. Maybe not mine because I'm very shadow banned. Everybody make sure you follow me and subscribe and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, there's people still trying to kiss babies when the reality is we want to hear what you're actually going to do, right? I don't want to hear the watery, shiny. It's a trope for a reason. We don't want that anymore. Bill Hicks said that, one of the beautiful things he said was, our next evolution is not another opposable thumb. He said, our next evolution is intellectual. It's spiritual. It's like he said, our next evolution is letting go of the institutions that no longer serve us. Is big government serving you, is what I would ask you. How is it working out? Now you can think outside the box, right? This institution is no longer serving us. So we'll wrap up. But I'd love to know if you, because obviously you've run for office, you've been an advocate, you've been a very effective activist. Do you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you coach potential politicians and campaigners?
Yes. Yes, I did this at PorcFest for the Libertarian Party. I'm going to be doing it for the Libertarian Party of Florida in a few weeks, and I do it online. Whenever people want to be coached, I'm very happy and interested in doing that if they are sincere about wanting to shrink government. If they're there because they want to be elected and have a permanent job in government, we're not a match. But if you're running because you want to shrink government and you want it real bad, please talk to me. And I want to talk to you. Right.
Because your breakdown was so brilliant. It was just like talking about the benefits, talking about the simplicity, talking about tangible things, and how to make it sexy, how to make it, attractive to the average person who hasn't even thought that the income tax has been around for, since the dawn of time. Someone keeps talking, there's that meme going around in the libertarian area. The people I know. And by the way, even some conservatives, you're getting a little libertarian and I'm proud of you. So just let yourself go that way. But anyway, there's this goose chasing someone like, hey, who built the roads before 1913? Wait a second. Hey, who built the roads? Because we just assume it's just the government has been around forever and ever. It's always been this big. Incorrect, everybody. Fantastic. Carla, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you joining me. Now,
I really appreciate you.
Thanks. I'm amazing. No, I'm just kidding. Now are you releasing new music soon, by the way, or is it up right now?
Yeah, at my website, carlahowell.com, I have about 8 songs released. All but one of them is political. And I have a couple more political songs coming, and I think my next release is going to be a mini album of non-political songs. Nice. I got to get them out there. Yeah. And then I'll have a few more coming this year. I'm also starting to work on another music video. So
Awesome. See, that's the kind of creator I am too. Like some of my songs are about, a story of a Mexican woman in the 1800s, and another one is about, meat eating, and another one is about, it's rarely politics because I don't want to even be in that box. I like not being in boxes. So it's good to meet another creator who doesn't stick to only one. Now, carlahowell.com. And is there any other place? Because you mentioned a website earlier that people could find you.
Yes, the Center for Small Government was founded in 2005 with Michael Cloud and myself. And we put it on hold actually because of the campaigns we were doing and because I moved to the DC area to work for the Libertarian National Committee. And so the goal is to relaunch it. And I'm actually looking for people who want to be part of that. There's some issues that need to be worked out in clarifying the mission and making sure it's focused. But it's one of the centerpieces of it right now is a small government pledge, which says as a candidate and as a voter, either one, I pledge that my voting and my actions will be consistent with making government small, that is my goal, that I will not vote for big government candidates. I will not vote for big government, for expansions of government, and I will vote for the people who are there to reduce it. So the idea is to create a voting block of people who want small government, and it's not partisan. So it doesn't matter what party the candidate runs on or who you vote for. It's a matter of whether they're for small government, because we need to build a block that's serious about it. So we're not just succumbing to this, we have to have a Democrat or Republican and we have to pick the lesser of two evils and that's just the way it is. No, it's not. No, it's not. And we need to build a block that says no to that thinking and that we're going to demand small government. So if you're interested in that, send me a note via that website, centerforsmallgovernment.com.
Amazing. All right, everybody, wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe, share, rate, and review, or you're racist. And you can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. And I'll go ahead and end the recording. Bye, everybody.